We're back on Fantasy Live with another round of Michael F. Florio's starts and sits. Again, go to NFL.com/start-sit to see the full list, but we got some premium options for you because we know you have big questions about the quarterback position. Who you starting here in Week 16?
Look, I'm a supporter of short kings. Myself, Jalen Brunson, and Bryce Young, who I am streaming myself in a couple of spots this week. Because, look, for one, he is running more as of late, and that elevates his floor and his ceiling. The last 3 weeks have been his most he's ran all year. Last week was a season high. But this is more about the matchup than anything. The Bucs all year have struggled against the pass, top 3 in yards and touchdowns since Week 10. And in fact, in that span, since Week 10, every QB who faced them has scored over 18 fantasy points, including Tyler Shuck and Kirk Cousins the last 2 weeks. And last year against this defense, Young went for multiple touchdowns in each of them. He is my Patrick Mahomes replacement in the league. You know how sad it is to take out Patrick Mahomes and plug in Bryce, but I do really like the matchup this week.
All right, so we've seen Bryce go for mega games in the division. We'll see what they do against the blitz-happy Bucs coming up this week. Who's your sit at quarterback?
This one pains me because Jackson Dart, my boy Anakin, I know you're a fan of that as well, but I think he needs to hit the bench this week because of that matchup against the Vikings. They've allowed the 5th fewest yards and 3rd fewest touchdowns. And like I was saying with Wan'Dale, they just haven't given up a lot of touchdowns as of late. Since Week 10, 1 passing I triple-checked that stat because I was like, it's got to be more. Nope. It's 1. I'm sitting him for percent in the league. I'd also play like Goff, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Bo Nix over him. But you know who I wouldn't play over him? Trevor Lawrence. I know he's the FedEx Air and Ground Player of the Week. He went off for the best game a quarterback has had all year, his career game, all of that. But now he gets the Denver Broncos. And look, when you look at his game logs, since their bye week, he has reached a new level, but he has 2 games in that span with fewer than 15 fantasy points. Those came against the Texans and the Chargers. Those are tough matchups to throw against. So are Denver, who allowed the 3rd fewest touchdowns, and only 3 quarterbacks have gone for multiple touchdowns against them. Last week he had 6. This week he might have 1. So again, just like with Dart, I'm not just saying sit him for anybody, but there's good streaming options this week, so I do think you can get away.
The Denver Broncos defense has turned you against Trevor Lawrence. Let's go to the tight ends. Who's your start this week? Your big start this week?
I don't know what this guy has to do to get the FedEx Air and Ground Player Award, but Kyle Pitts went out this past week, had a career game, had the biggest game any tight end has had this season in fantasy, but it wasn't just a 1-week thing. He has scored 15 or more fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. He's been the top target for Kirk Cousins in his last 4, and now he gets the Cardinals, who have struggled against tight ends. So whether or not Drake London plays, obviously I think it's better if he sits for Kyle Pitts, but I do think Pitts is in play regardless. And then, look, I'll take an L here. I said to sit Dallas Goedert last week. My bad. Hopefully you survived it if you did. But after being just a completely forgotten man for a large chunk of the season, he has 17 targets in his last 2 weeks with over 70 yards in each of those. But we all know touchdowns are what make him special for fantasy. Well, the Commanders have allowed the 2nd most touchdowns to them. And against this Dan Quinn defense last year, he played him twice. He went for 11 and 15 fantasy points, with the bigger game actually coming in the NFC Championship game, a game that you could say meant a little bit to both sides. So, I think Dallas Goedert goes off in this one.
Yeah, both teams were trying hard.
Yeah.
In that NFC Championship game. Let's go. If Goddard's back in your starts, who's going on the sit side?
My guy, Tyler Warren. I have pounded the table for him more than any tight end this season, but the well's kind of gone dry as of late. He has reached 12 fantasy points once since Week 8. In the last 3 games, he has fewer than 25 yards. And last week, I thought Phillip Rivers would mean good things for him, right? A lot of short, quick throws. He targets the tight end at a high rate. And he did throw Tyler Warren's way, but it didn't lead to production. And with Rivers literally completing only 2 passes of more than 10 air yards, I think the 49ers are going to load up near the line of scrimmage and dare Rivers to win downfield. So Warren, I'm sitting him for Pitts in the league. I would be sitting him for Parkinson in the league. And in another one, I was all set to start Darren Waller. Going back and forth on that one a bit now, but still leaning Darren Waller's way.
The starts and sits for Week 16. To see the full list, go to NFL.com/start-sit. We will start with the running backs and wide receivers. Mike, who are your running back starts in the fantasy postseason?
Look, last Thursday, everyone's mind, like they were losing their mind. Like, how is Bucky Irving not getting into the end zone and stuff? Well, because he hasn't been their best red zone runner this season, but he's still very much so in play for fantasy purposes. I know he disappointed you last week. And again, the goal line work is not a guarantee to go his way again this week, but the Panthers have once again been the Panthers when it comes to stopping the run. They are top 10 in rushing yards, touchdowns, and explosive runs, and the struggles have only gotten worse as the season has gone on. And then Bucky last year against this Panthers defense went for over 180 yards in each of the 2 games that he faced them. So you were playing him in that good matchup. And then let's get a little weird. You're playing Aaron Jones, who has become more of a sit in this article as of late. But this is all about the matchup because the Giants are just abysmal against the run. Since week 11, they've allowed a league-high yards per carry, yards before contact, and explosive run rate. They struggle against running backs in the passing game. I know Jones has pretty much been all floor, but we have seen that running backs can go off against this Giants team, and he could catch passes if they're trailing. So I think Aaron Jones is someone you get in to your starting lineup this week.
Aaron Jones goes into our lineup. Who was maybe drafted in the top 10 this season, regrettably, that's going on the bench?
And I listen to what I have Ashton Jeanty in a league, and I'm not even considering him because I also have RJ Harvey and Breece Hall that I could play over him. But Ashton Jeanty, 35 rushing yards or fewer in 4 of his last 5 games. And for a while, it was like, okay, yeah, but they're throwing him the ball 7-8 times a game. That keeps him afloat. Well, he has just 15 yards on 10 targets in the last 2 weeks. And on top of that, he gets the Texans, who've allowed the 4th fewest yards to running backs this season, and they are just getting better and better defensively as the season goes on. Plus, Raider games lately have become a game of like, will they score a touchdown? Stay tuned to find out. I can't tell you with any guarantee that they will even score one against this Houston defense.
All right, it's been the staying tuned part has been tough with the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's go over to the wide receivers. Who we starting this week?
Jamison Williams. He was someone that I thought was going to break out this season, and all it took was Dan Campbell calling plays. Because in that span, he has topped 88 yards in every game, and he has a touchdown in 4 of those 6 games. He's averaged 19 fantasy points per game with Dan Campbell as the play caller. To put that into perspective, only JSN, Puka, Amon-Ra, and Drake London topped that number this season. And then it's a good matchup. The Steelers, they've struggled against wide receivers. They've struggled against the long ball. And it's speedy receivers that have really given that older defense some trouble. And speaking of Steelers, on the other side in this one, I think you play DK Metcalf, who is getting better as of late on a bit of a hot streak with over 14 fantasy points in 2 straight in 3 of his last 4. But this to me is about the matchup. The Lions have allowed the most yards to receivers on the season and since week 11. Top 2 in fantasy points per game in that span and all year long. They struggle against the deep ball. They struggle to keep receivers out of the end zone. And the Steelers could be chasing points with the Lions at home on the other side. So yeah, if you're not playing DK against the Lions, when are you?
Well, and that's the thing. It was earlier this season where DK Metcalf was on the other side of the start-sit equation. Is it the converse for the guy that you're sitting?
Yeah, I have been trying to champion this player, and it just hasn't happened as of late. Emeka Egbuka. Sadly, I think it is time to consider putting him on the bench. He has the lowest catchable target rate since week 6. He also has the second highest drop rate in that span. So him and Baker have just been off. You can see here there's a lot of should-be production that is being left on the field. But Mike Evans returned last week. He played half the snaps, was still the top target. Chris Godwin led them in routes and snaps. Jalen McMillan is back as well. I still believe that eventually Egbuka and Baker are going to get right. So I'm not telling you just to sit him for anybody. But if you have another option that you like, or you're like debating between Egbuka and someone else, I think you go in the other direction.
Over on the app or the website, you get projections for how your players will score in this week of fantasy football. We're going to tell you whether or not the actual number will be higher or lower than the projection, and we'll start with Bears quarterback Caleb Williams, higher or lower than 15.3 fantasy points.
I don't want to feel the wrath of Rank's apologies, but I might, because I'm saying lower this week for Caleb Williams. I do have him as a sit over in Stardom Situm because the floor this year has been low. In fact, he has scored fewer than this number in 5 of his last 9 games, including when he got the Packers 2 weeks ago. and he scored 14.9 fantasy points in a game that he had 2 touchdowns. That game was also the lowest completion percentage a quarterback has had against the Packers this season. And more than anything, it is just 2 teams that know each other very well, that have just played each other 2 weeks ago, and they're going to be playing in very cold conditions. I expect the Bears to run the ball very effectively in this game, which probably means not the biggest day for Caleb Williams.
All right, so a lower projection for Caleb Williams. Let's go to Adam Rank and one Lamar Jackson, higher or lower than 19.6 against the Patriots.
Lamar Jackson, hold on, that reminds me. Dear Lamar, I'm sorry. What are we? Oh, this is higher.
Yeah,
lower.
yeah, we're doing higher, lower. Entirely different stuff.
I'm actually gonna go higher on this one. I have faith in Lamar Jackson getting it together this week against the New England Patriots. Listen, I want to have a little bit of faith here. He's had 2 touchdowns in each of his last 2 games. He's starting to get on a little bit of a hot streak right here. Plus, you know what? I think that he has shown in the past that he has done a good job of running the football against the New England Patriots. And you know what? We're getting to the point of the season where it's like, you know what? You got to go all out. Like, this is the playoff. This is pretty much the playoffs right here. You got to go out there. You got to play your best game. The Patriots have allowed a touchdown on 75% of their red zone drives this season. So my conjecture is that Lamar Jackson moves them into range, and then he starts throwing those touchdown passes to Mark Andrews. So I'm going to say that he does go ahead of this 19-point projection and gets into the 20-point range.
All right, so Florio with one lower and Rank with one higher. Let's go to Travis Etienne in that big game against the Broncos. Higher or lower than 13.8?
I mean, you could flip these numbers around, and that's what he had last week. So I'm going to say higher despite the tough matchup against Denver. Because, look, he has scored 15 or more, which 15 is more than 13.8 in 6 of his last 7. He is getting so much volume on the ground right now, and Tootin is out, and that has been his biggest threat to take away some touches, especially near the goal line and as a receiver. Well, we know Etienne can catch the ball plenty if they are trailing, and we saw him used as a receiver last week. 3 of his touchdowns came as a pass catcher, not on the ground. And then the Broncos, look, we know how good this defense is, but they have been leakier against the run the last couple of weeks. So Etienne got you this far. I think you stick with him, and despite the tough matchup, I think he comes through for you.
Again, looking forward to that game. A great game, great matchup between 2 AFC contenders. Let's go to the NFC stuff, which doesn't have the win totals that other game has, but still postseason implications higher or lower than 11.8 Rank for Rico.
I'm going to go higher on this one. I think part of this might be me wish casting this for Rico Dottle, who's been a huge part of my league of record team that took the #1 seed going into the semifinal matchup this season. But you know what? The Buccaneers have allowed the most rushing yards to running backs this season. They've allowed close to 6 yards per play on the rushing, 6 yards per play. So I really am hopeful. Again, this is a hopeful thing. But when I start looking at the landscape of who's going to be available out there for you at the running back position, I really do. I don't know. I might consider starting somebody like DeAndre Swift over him, but then I get into a situation too. Am I flexing him over guys like Emeka Egbuka and players of that nature? So I'm committed to Rico Dottle. It's one of those things like, listen, we've gotten this far. We're gonna ride it out, Rico. We'll see what happens, but I'm gonna go higher here.
All right, so a positive higher, even though Rank seemed very reluctant to hit that number of 11.8.
I'm debating Rico or Ladd in a league myself. I get it. It's a tough week right now.
Yeah, big time matchup there. Let's go to Wan'Dale Robinson, who has never stopped scoring all season long, higher or lower than 12.4. That seems easy for Wan'Dale.
The wide receiver 9 on the season. Now, imagine what Malik Neighbors would have done. I'm going to go lower here, though. Because of the matchup. That's what this is about, right? Like, Wan'Dale brings so much safe volume and such a safe floor weekly, but the Vikings have been the toughest matchup for wide receivers. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to the position this season. The last time a wide receiver scored a touchdown against them was week 9. We're heading into week 16. And Robinson, when he doesn't score a touchdown, averages less than 10 fantasy points per game. So that is I think he sits somewhere around this number if I'm projecting myself, but I have him as a sit this week, so I'm going to go with lower there.
All right, so a lower for Wan'Dale. Well, let's go over to another wide receiver who scored a lot of points, but again, played the Minnesota Vikings, so the totals went down. George Pickens, higher or lower than 15.5 against the Chargers, right?
Oh, this is a tough one. I would love to wish cast it higher because he's another player that is on my League of Records side, but I'm going to go lower. I just can't trust it. And not only has he been seeing his production dip over the last couple of weeks, he's had 2 consecutive games with fewer than 9 fantasy points, getting less than 6 receptions in those fixtures. I mentioned this earlier with the LA Chargers. They're one of the toughest against opposing wide receivers. So when I look at this matchup, I'm willing to give CeeDee Lamb the grace here. I'm going to start CeeDee Lamb. I'm not benching him. For a guy like George Pickens, I don't know that I can trust him. I could see a scenario where Ryan Flournoy has more points than George Pickens. I don't know if I want to be a part of it. I'm really like working through the motions right here. I do have an opportunity. I do have DJ Moore on this, and I think I'm going to end up going with DJ Moore over George Pickens. I'm going to have to leave him on the bench.